Seeing Casina's amazement and bright eyes, Mayan felt a sense of youthful pride. "Come on, praise me," his expression seemed to say. After his show of boasting, Mayan reminded her to start eating, the food's getting cold. Casina was about to ask when the snow would start falling. Mayan, growing impatient, replied, "It starts around the beginning of next month." Casina felt a tinge of jealousy, as it never got cold enough for snow in the south. Mayan, now grumpy, grumbled, "Stop comparing the two places. Now eat, the food's getting cold," which made Casina burst into laughter. Earlier, he had shown concern, and when the maid brought the food, Mayan had thoughtfully instructed, "Switch all the greasy dishes with mine, and leave the light salads for her." Casina felt a flutter of unexplainable warmth. Noticing Casina still sitting idly, Mayan glared and said, "Don't tell me you're so weak that you'll vomit blood while holding a bowl." Casina immediately picked up a plate and started eating. The Duke could be quite scary, she thought. Casina suddenly felt guilty for judging him without knowing anything about him. Moreover, her coming here had partly burdened him with unnecessary responsibility. If anything were to happen, the Duke would unjustly bear the blame. Casina inadvertently blurted out, "Your Grace," catching Mayan's attention. He put down his fork and asked, "Casina, what's the matter?" In the greenhouse, the dining atmosphere was much more comfortable than at Casina's childhood home. She hesitated, wanting to say something but couldn't find the words. Mian, seeing her hesitation, asked, "You know, my patience is a bit short." For some reason, today the Duke looked unusually handsome, causing Casina to stare blankly. She quickly shook her head, trying to gather her thoughts. Finally, after a long pause, Casina apologized for coming here without asking for his permission. "It's just that I was afraid you wouldn't agree if I asked beforehand." Mian, straightforward as ever, responded, "Casina, don't worry about the first time you came here. I didn't mean anything by it, but I was just too concerned for your safety, a young woman traveling alone to my territory. More than anything, I'm not afraid of responsibility or obstacles. And although it's a bit late, I also apologize for being too harsh with my words that day." The Duke's honesty made Casina realize how kind he truly was. Despite the fact that she had put him in a difficult position, he didn't show any signs of displeasure. Even her own family hadn't shown her such care and consideration. Casina had a bold thought, should she tell him about her rare illness right now? She hesitated for a long time, wanting to say it but overthinking led her to consider numerous issues. The primary concern was whether the Duke would accept a terminally ill person in his territory. The worst-case scenario was that he might even kick her out. "If I can't even find a place to die in peace, then what else is there?" she thought, forcing a smile to deflect the issue by telling the Duke that she would enjoy her meal. Mian didn't press further. He simply asked out of curiosity, without any major considerations. He urged Casina, "Eat plenty, and next time, I'll prepare even more delicious food for you. If you keep talking instead of eating, the chef will be heartbroken because you're not enjoying the meal." After a sumptuous breakfast, she returned to her room to rest. Truth be told, moving around had become very difficult for her. Half of Casina's body now functioned solely on willpower and the medicine she had brought with her, so she needed long-term rest. Patting her small, full belly, she felt nostalgic for the first time, having eaten so well. At home, she would always vomit because they never knew she couldn't eat oily food, nor did they bother to ask. Suddenly, something caught Casina's eye. She glanced across the building to a place the Duke had once mentioned, the rooftop of the mansion, which had an incredibly beautiful view. He had suggested she go there if she enjoyed drawing. The very next day, the Duke's mansion was filled with the echo of Mian's infamous, cranky voice. His face was filled with anger as he prepared to scold, "Casina, do you even listen with your ears? How did you end up like this after going up there?" Casina, wrapped in a blanket and trembling, replied fearfully, "Mian, I didn't mean to, heh heh." Mian, furious, barked, "Casina, why did you go up there and get sick? Don't you remember what I told you? You even made promises." Casina responded innocently, "What did you say again?" Mian, exasperated, his face darkened with irritation. She laughed nervously, "I remember now. First, you said if I went up there, I should tell the butler. Second, I should bring warm clothes. And third, I should only stay for an hour and then come back to warm up. Kusina had every intention of following Mion's 3 rules. However, when she peeked out, there was no one in sight, not even the butler. Not wanting to disturb anyone while they were sleeping, Kusina, in her overly gentle nature, decided to go barefoot, in her nightgown with just a thin scarf, carrying her sketchpad up to the rooftop. By the time she reached the attic stairs, she was already feeling tired and breathless. But she thought the beautiful scenery would be worth the effort. As she reached the rooftop, the sun was just beginning to rise. The view before Kusina was indescribably beautiful. For someone with a passion for art like her, or anyone else who witnessed such majestic scenery, it was breathtaking and worth capturing. For Kusina, she was simply addicted to drawing. She pulled out her sketchpad and began to outline the first strokes. Whenever she drew, she became so absorbed that she forgot everything else. The firm, swift pencil strokes took shape without any need for a guide. The magical essence of this intricate drawing began to drain her strength. Kusina felt breathless, dizzy, and unsteady on her feet. However, something drove her to push on, telling herself that she was almost done. Just then, someone suddenly appeared behind Kusina. She looked up and saw the handsome face of the Duke, veins bulging in anger. Her artistic inspiration quickly faded away. Back in the present, Kusina was curled up in a blanket, shivering from the cold. She apologized, feeling wronged. Duke, I was afraid of bothering everyone too much. Mion, his eyes sharp and filled with anger, snapped, if you want to die, let me fetch some rocks, put them in water, and drown you quickly. Kusina hurriedly explained, I truly didn't realize how fast time was passing. I didn't do it on purpose. From the time Kusina went up before dawn to the time the Duke found her, it had been well over 2 hours. Kusina laughed weakly, haha, he really has a sharp tongue, but I was wrong this time, so I'll accept the scolding. Seeing her laugh made Mion's blood boil. He growled, are you laughing at me right now? Kusina quickly covered her mouth, oh my, he's really scary when he's angry. Mion sighed, no longer yelling. He placed a hand on her head and lamented, why can't people warm each other up? It would be so much more efficient. What he meant was why he couldn't simply transfer his warmth to her without having to be so harsh, rather than implying physical contact, skin to skin. Kusina, surprised, asked, are you cold? Mion growled, you dare talk to me? Kusina wisely stayed silent. His anger was truly terrifying. But since she had been wrapped in the blanket for quite a while, she bravely asked, Duke, may I take this off now? Mion responded to Kusina with curiosity about her painting. He asked gently, can I see your painting? Kusina felt a bit shy but handed it over. Her painting was a direct sketch of the sunset view of the mansion from the rooftop. It was quite rough since it was unfinished. Kusina felt a bit insecure. Compared to her brother's swordsmanship skills and Abelia's artistic talent, she thought her painting was just a way to comfort herself. On the contrary, Mion asked, puzzled, do you have a habit of hiding your skills? Because this painting is impressive, and it's hard to believe you say you're not good at it. Kusina was full of question marks, not understanding what the Duke meant. Is there something wrong with my painting? Mion admitted, although I have no expertise in art, from an audience's perspective, I find this painting incredibly perfect, even beautiful. Hearing praise for the first time in her life, Kusina felt rejuvenated, almost instantly healthy. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she stammered, this is just my comfort. The Duke doesn't need to be so polite. Mion continued to praise her, making Kusina even more embarrassed. The Duke had never thought that the view from the mansion's rooftop could be so beautiful. Miss, have confidence. This painting is very promising once completed. Kusina thanked him for the compliment, even though she believed it was just flattery. The time between the two extended until noon, as Mion was too worried about Kusina catching a cold and her insecurity. Mion grumbled, this girl drives me mad every minute. Mion affirmed, I only say what I mean. If the painting had no potential, it would be better to find another job. Kusina thought about it and realized, he's right. Her face blossomed when Mion handed the painting back to her and asked, when this painting is finished, can you give it to me? Surprised that someone wanted her painting, Kusina agreed. However, Mian explained that he was interested in it and needed the finished painting to send by telegram for assessment by an expert he knew. Kasina chuckled, saying, "You don't need to send it for assessment. I just draw for fun, no one looks at it." Kasina was flustered, her cheeks rosy. She was just trying to soothe her loneliness, but now her work was being noticed. How embarrassing to be praised. While the two were bickering and showing affection, outside, the physician arrived and greeted them. Before examining her, the physician gaped in surprise. Who would have thought they would see a lady wrapped in a blanket like a cocoon? The physician almost choked, questioning, "Sir, wrapping the lady like a cocoon, was that your idea?" Mian pouted, "Yes." The physician sighed, "All right, I'm too used to this." Mian briefly explained the situation. It seems her body weakened due to the long trip. Moreover, she sat on the cold, windy rooftop all day. So, examine her thoroughly. The physician nodded, understanding. He approached and gently greeted Kasina. But as soon as he reached out, she recoiled. Kasina looked down in the blanket, leaving the physician bewildered and unsure of what to do next. Feeling awkward, he looked back at the Duke for guidance. Mian was at a loss as well, so he asked, "What's the matter? Why don't you let the physician examine you?" Kasina grumbled from within the blanket, "I told you I don't like physicians." Mian snapped, "Do you think I wanted this? Who was the one who sat out in the cold, making me call the physician?" The little rabbit hiding in the blanket remained stubborn, unwilling to cooperate with the doctor. Mian, having run out of patience, burst out, "It's impossible to reason with you." The Duke immediately acted, picking Kasina up like an object and carrying her towards the bed for examination. The physician was startled, "Heavens! Who carries a lady like a sack?" The lady was still in shock, experiencing such treatment for the first time. Mian, unfazed, asked, "Is there something wrong with that?" She won't let the doctor examine her, and this is quite polite, actually. The physician lamented, "Someone save me. No one in the north is this rough. Moreover, the lady isn't a disobedient soldier." He reminded the Duke, "People from the south shouldn't be treated as harshly as us northerners." Mian looked like he understood, "Bear with me. No one taught me this. I spend more time on the battlefield than at home." Kasina's face turned as red as a tomato. The physician gently coaxed her, saying, "Please give me your hand so I can check your pulse." This time, she obediently complied. As soon as he touched her wrist, the physician sensed something was wrong. This was the first time he encountered such symptoms. Her pulse was very unusual. Kasina's eyes began to droop, and she felt sleepy, swaying unsteadily. The Duke was about to ask about her condition, but the physician signaled for him to remain silent. Like a caring mother, the physician said, "If you're tired, go ahead and sleep. I'll just cover you with a blanket, nothing more." Despite telling herself to stay awake, her body wouldn't allow it, and she soon fell into a deep slumber. The physician's expression clearly worsened, a look he only had when encountering a case so bizarre it was beyond his understanding. Seeing the physician's grave expression, Mian asked, "Is it serious? Why do you look like that?" After examining her condition and diagnosing her, the physician reported to the Duke, "It seems the young lady is not in good health. Specifically, her breathing is weak and rapid, her pulse is erratic, sometimes present and sometimes absent, and she is debilitated. Her body temperature is burning hot, her heart beats weakly and irregularly, and she has red rashes on her hands. This is indeed a strange illness." The entire room fell silent, only the sound of Kasina's erratic breathing could be heard. The physician reported to the Duke, "It's possible she has what we call the artist's disease." Mian was confused. "What kind of disease is that? I've never heard of it." The physician began to explain further. "While it's rare in the north, it's quite common in the south. You see, this empire has been blessed and protected by the gods since its founding. The gods have also bestowed certain blessings. In the north, there are many warriors because of the demonic creatures, but the south is entirely different. People there often possess remarkable artistic abilities. This leads to what we call the artist's disease." The physician continued to elaborate on the severity of the disease. "Since these blessings enable humans to create astonishingly brilliant works, they are too overwhelming for a human body to contain, thus leading to side effects. At this moment, the Duke remembered his close friend Berto, who had a similar talent. Berto's songs, imbued with sincerity, had healing powers. The physician agreed with the example. Lord Berto is indeed a descendant of the artistic bloodline and is very famous in the empire. Mian sought further confirmation. So this girl is an artist with the power to create miracles? The physician confirmed, the symptoms are consistent with the rashes under the skin and on her arms. Mian pondered, no wonder when I saw the landscape Cassina painted, it was just a view I see every day, but through her sketch, it felt so vivid and magnificent that even a layman like me felt goosebumps. The Duke asked seriously, so is this artist's disease dangerous? How severe can it be? He was deeply worried, fearing for the girl's life. The physician shrugged. That depends on what type of this disease she has. The Duke began to pray. There are different types of this disease? The truth was that depending on the level of miraculousness of the masterpiece, the recipient of the blessing would fall into a certain severity category. The first and mildest case might result in reduced physical strength but still allows for a normal life. The second, more severe case, could result in the loss of some body parts related to the miracle they create. And the worst case, though extremely rare, is the cost of one's life. So you're saying that in the worst case, this girl could die, right? Mian summarized the critical point. Regrettably, the physician had to admit, it's a very rare case, but it's not entirely impossible. If that's the case, it's more like a death sentence than a divine blessing, the Duke grumbled. But there's no helping it, I suppose, considering it's the power of the gods in a mere mortal. Cassina remained sound asleep, oblivious to everything. Feeling helpless, Mian propped his chin on his hand and asked the physician, isn't there a better way? The room fell silent as the physician explained that Cassina had a terminal illness beyond his ability to cure. Mian's frustration grew. So, even if she loses limbs or dies, all we can do is sit and watch, just providing care? The physician replied, if she wants to live, completing a work of art might slightly reduce the illness, but usually, once completed, her strength might drain even faster. Mian, irritated, suggested, then can't she just stop doing art altogether? This was the quickest solution he could think of, valuing life over art. The physician sighed, my lord, if I told you to put down your sword because you might lose a limb or die in battle, would you? Mian sighed, all right, I get it. That was short-sighted of me. The physician continued, a severe case like the lady's only occurs when someone has an exceptionally high level of skill, bordering on that of a master. They become obsessed with art and have a profound appreciation for it. Essentially, she has dedicated the remainder of her life to art, which is why she is in this condition. Mian unconsciously glanced at Cassina. At their engagement, he hadn't noticed anything unusual. She had seemed healthy then, but now she lay there, suffering from cold deep within her heart and a burning fever on the outside. Cassina slept deeply, oblivious to everything. So what can we do for her now? Mian asked, feeling distressed. The physician reported, for now, we can only provide fever reducers and manage her condition as best we can. It will take several days to see any improvement. Mian agreed, understanding that she was unwell and needed the care. He saw the physician out and thought about sending a telegram. After the physician left, the room became even more silent. Mian walked over to the sleeping girl, observing her peaceful face and the painting she had created. He remembered the physician's words. What kind of life has she led that made her immerse herself in art to this extent? How many secrets is she hiding from me? Mian wondered. The thought of things beyond his control frustrated him deeply. Mian stayed by Cassina's side from morning until late at night. The room was filled with a somber atmosphere. Cassina slept the entire day, and Mian tended to her constantly, changing warm water to reduce her fever and checking her condition. Mian stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air and smoke a cigarette. As he lit it, he felt a wave of melancholy wash over him. What was he supposed to do about this girl? Looking back, he remembered seeing her cry once during their engagement. It was when she saw two people, one the heir of the count's family and the other the youngest son, sitting and chatting on a designated chair. Her face was so sad that it seemed like she was on the verge of tears. Nevertheless, when someone came to greet her, she still smiled as if she was very familiar with them. This surprised Mian a bit. As he tucked the telegram into his pocket, he found it amusing. Kusina looked foolish like a squid, and he had expected her to get angry. Somehow, she seemed to find something amusing and just kept smiling naively. Afterward, Mian whistled to summon a carrier eagle. This eagle was trained by the Duke to deliver messages accurately and swiftly to the right place. Mian attached the telegram to the bird's leg with a faint hope that it would reach Berto in time. Watching the eagle fly away, Mian hoped that Berto would reply at least before March when the dreadful snow season arrives. The sun was just rising, meaning the Duke had stayed up all night to care for his fiancée. Elsewhere, at the doctor's house where Kusina had previously gone for diagnosis, the doctor was the mentor of Notcher, Abelia's private physician. Notcher worriedly asked his mentor, "Why do you suddenly want to go to the north? Is something wrong?" The mentor didn't explain much, only saying, "Take care of things here. I'll be back around next spring at the earliest." Notcher expressed concern, "It's very cold in the north, master." The mentor was unfazed. "Even if I leave now, I might feel a bit anxious and tense, but I should reach there before winter." Still worried, Notcher asked, "What if winter arrives while you're still on the way? Why must you go so urgently?" While packing his medical kit, the mentor explained, "About a month ago, a girl with an artistic ailment, who doesn't have long to live, came to see me. She invited me to the north. Regardless, I am concerned about my patient. Moreover, there are no hospitals or physicians specialized in this ailment in the north." Notcher reasoned, "Isn't an ailment with a short life expectancy one of the most challenging artistic diseases? Why even bother then?" What he meant was that if the illness was that difficult to treat, why make the effort? The mentor sighed, putting on his hat, "That's true. Usually, I find this disease too late to treat. She might even die." Notcher was perplexed, "Then why do you still want to go?" The mentor further explained, "This girl seems to have been born into a wealthy family, but she fell victim to this ailment. Perhaps her parents didn't take proper care of her. If they had been more attentive, this might not have happened." Saying that, he stepped into the carriage, ignoring his disciple's attempts to stop him. His luggage was already packed. Notcher, despondent, added, "There have been many cases of parents abandoning their children, so it's no surprise that parents could be that cold-hearted." The master sighed, seriously reminding his young pupil, "In any case, don't be too arrogant. Treat all patients fairly, understand?" Little did he know that his disciple had already lost the concept of fairness towards patients. Notcher forced a smile, pretending to have taken his master's words to heart. The master warned him further, "If I hear any unpleasant rumors about you from the hospital, I won't let it slide." Suddenly, Notcher asked, "Who is that patient, anyway?" The doctor scratched his beard as he tried to recall. "The name is somewhat hard to remember, something like Gina. It's been a while, so I'm not sure anymore." After the farewell, Notcher stood watching the carriage roll away, wishing his master a safe journey. On the other hand, he found the name Gina very familiar. Could it be someone from Abelia's family? But then he reassured himself, it's probably just a coincidence. In the south, at the Count's house, they were still searching for Kusina. The news they consistently received was that she had arrived in the capital and then vanished without a trace. The Count told his eldest son that all they knew was that she had mingled with the crowds in the capital, so they were still searching. Infix, Kusina's brother, a talented young man expected to succeed the family, worriedly asked his father, "Is this approach okay? Kusina has been gone for over a month now. I think we should increase the number of soldiers searching for her." The Count immediately stopped writing upon hearing the suggestion to increase the search party. He scolded, "Infix, don't you have any sense? We can only search within our territory without drawing attention from the royal family. If we increase the number of soldiers now, the royal family will definitely take notice. Why are you so stubborn?" Infix remained deeply concerned for his sister, but he lacked the power to oppose his father's decision. The Count remained adamant, "Keep the number of searchers the same, but increase the funds. Spend as much as needed." In a flash, he turned to look at the framed photos on his desk. There were many, including family pictures and individual portraits of the members. He picked up the photo of his youngest daughter, Abelia, and felt a bit dazed. Looking at all the other photos, he suddenly realized that there were almost no portraits of Cassina at all. Now, it dawned on him that even if they sent people to search for her, no one would recognize Cassina's face because there wasn't a single photo of her, not even for a wanted poster or search notice. He began wandering around the mansion as if searching for something long forgotten. Near the staircase, he recalled Cassina's words, "I never expected you to remember my room, father." He vividly remembered her saying coldly, "I thought you had forgotten my room already." Let's see, Abelia is the weakest, always ill, so she was given the room closest to the staircase for easy access to the doctor. Next is Infix, as he has to work every day and can't afford to be late. Then comes his younger brother, Bon, who stays in the room next to his. So, what about Cassina? At that moment, he glanced towards Cassina's room. It was a room at the end of the hallway, isolated, a room at the farthest end, also the scariest. He remembered how she had once said she was scared because the room was too far from the staircase, but he had simply scolded her to grow up and stop acting childish. Now, in retrospect, as a small child, her fear was justified. The Count had never noticed that this way of assigning rooms also invisibly drew boundaries between the children in the house. He knew well how terrifying it was to leave a girl under 10 years old at the end of the hallway, but he had still done it. As he trudged to Cassina's room, it was almost laughable that, despite living in the same house, he had to ask himself when the last time he had entered this desolate room was, aside from the time he scolded her for feeding Abelia improperly. And, in the mind of a man skilled in calculations, he already had the answer. Opening the door and stepping into the room, the smell of wood and ink hit him sharply, completely unlike a young lady's room. He touched the worn-out table, realizing now how cramped and stifling it was for someone like Cassina to live in. But he had only ever scolded Cassina for not speaking up about her needs, ignoring the fact that she had cried herself hoarse without him noticing. On the desk, there were no cosmetics, only pencils and paintbrushes. It was clear he chose to see only what he wanted. Opening a drawer, he found no hair clips or accessories, just sketch papers filled with Cassina's drawings. Picking up a simple, uncolored sketch, he was startled by the familiarity of the scene. The drawing depicted the exact view from Cassina's room, looking out at the nearby mountain. He suddenly remembered that this view was from a picnic several years ago, celebrating Abelia's slight recovery. He then horrifically realized that Cassina had not been at that picnic. The drawing depicted the family of 5, but Cassina was missing. At that moment, the Countess entered the room, asking why he was there. The Count vaguely responded that he had some matters to attend to and asked why she was there. She admitted feeling emptiness since Cassina left and, as a mother, regretted not having any memories of her. It was indeed laughable. The Count handed the Countess the drawing Cassina had made of the family picnic, without her in it. He asked if Cassina had always drawn such pictures. Judging by the paper's wear, she guessed Cassina had drawn it long ago. Guessing, because she really didn't know. Both parents, who always claimed that no one understood their children better than they did, now relied on guesses. The Countess suddenly recalled that Cassina used to show her drawings frequently, but she had stopped over time. She assumed Cassina had grown tired of drawing. Neither of them realized something was wrong with their parenting. She sincerely asked her husband if Cassina would be all right. The whole family was worried about her. Abelia was sad all day, missing her sister, and Manwha wanted to go find Cassina. The Count reassured his wife, saying Cassina was smart and would survive out there. He planned to send letters to trusted nobles to inquire about her. The Countess sighed, "We never once worried about her. Why is this happening now?" Seeing his wife's distressed face, the Count advised her not to worry too much, as she hadn't been sleeping well due to concerns about both Abelia and Cassina. To be safe, he would also send a letter to the Duke. The Countess, surprised, asked, could she have gone all the way to the far north? The Count's answer betrayed his complete lack of faith in Cassina. He believed she was too timid to travel far with the little money she had and thought she was likely hiding somewhere in the mansion. The Count remained stone-hearted, while the Countess was more sensitive. Looking at the simple yet eerie drawing, she felt a suffocating loneliness and a chilling fear, unconsciously gripping the paper tighter because it felt so cold. The couple, in complete harmony, ultimately choose to believe what they want to believe. On Abelia's side, she is deeply saddened by the absence of her older sister. Dr. Notcher noticed this and gently comforted her, reassuring her that everything would be okay and her sister would return soon. Speaking of Cassina, Notcher sees her as a quiet person who almost seems not to exist. Despite her dark brown hair tinged with the family's signature yellow hue, she possesses strikingly unique blue eyes, making her an oddly beautiful woman. Abelia often boasts to him about her older sister number 1. Previously, Cassina was always there for Abelia, even fabricating excuses to keep her from feeling lonely by preventing her from meeting friends and staying with her instead. When Abelia demanded bedtime fairy tales, her sister would read to her until she fell asleep. Abelia once stated that her sister wouldn't see any friends and would stay by her side all day long. But now, things are different. Notcher warmly praised Abelia, acknowledging that she indeed has a very good older sister. Yes, indeed, he praised Abelia for having such a sister. However, deep down, he secretly blamed Cassina for being insensitive. Furthermore, who knows, maybe that person doesn't dislike Abelia that much. He remembered a previous occasion on the staircase when Abelia said to trust Cassina, and her expression remained unchanged as she tersely replied, "Don't trust." Even though Abelia didn't hear, Notcher guessed that maybe Abelia trusted her sister too much to know anything. While giving Abelia medicine, he silently reproached Cassina, feeling that regardless of the circumstances, she should visit or send a letter to her younger sister. Such is the nature of people, often indifferent. Incidentally, while taking medicine, Abelia also showed him a talent of Cassina's that she had recently discovered. The girl searched for a landscape painting her sister had drawn for Notcher. Seeing her show off the landscape painting and praise her sister's beautiful artistry. Looking at the painting, Notcher was stunned that a person could create something like this. The painting was simple in subject but vivid in every detail, as if the viewer stood right there, experiencing the scene. Notcher was shocked and asked Abelia once again to confirm if these paintings were indeed made by Cassina. The girl pursed her lips and said, "It's from my sister, what's with that expression on your face?" "If my mom was here, I would have told her to praise her 10 times already," Abelia calmly said. "My older sister may be alone, but she excels at everything she does." At this moment, Notcher abruptly stood up, hastily excusing himself from Abelia as he had urgent matters to attend to. In reality, he had just discovered a truth that none of the household members were aware of, a certainty that seemed unimaginable. "Hopefully it's a case of mistaken identity, but when I checked the patient notes left behind," he muttered to himself, "it listed Cassina without a surname, diagnosed with a terminal illness, with about a year left to live. Could someone please erase this damn character for me?" Meanwhile, upon hearing her name mentioned, the protagonist opened her eyes. She had been unconscious for over a day and only awakened around midnight, scanning the room with bleary eyes to find it empty. It seemed she had slept for a long time. Sitting up on the bed and looking out at the balcony, the dawn was just breaking. Having lain in bed for so long, she felt a dryness in her throat. Cassina intended to get out of bed to find some water when she glanced at the bedside table. There, already prepared, was a full, warm glass of water. It seemed like the first time Cassina had been cared for this attentively. A gentle emotion passed through her. Duke Mion truly seems very kind. But thinking about it, she began to wrestle with her own thoughts, clutching the pillow tightly. "I shouldn't have come here in the first place," Cassina muttered, hoping that Duke Mion didn't know about her condition. Initially, upon receiving news of her illness and a prognosis of less than a year from the doctor, she had imagined how her family would react over time if she told them. At times, she even wondered if using her impending death as a bargaining chip for the care and attention she had always longed for from her family was too selfish. Just thinking about it brought tears to her eyes. When she regained her composure, Cassina felt conflicted about trading her illness for affection. It momentarily made her feel uncomfortable and uneasy. Moreover, happiness seemed as elusive as a grain of sand in the desert, always slipping through her fingers just when she thought she had grasped it. That was why Cassina had sought refuge in the north, where the Duke's family couldn't reach her. Here, there was someone who harbored bitter resentment toward her, Mion. She had assumed he would ignore her and let her self-destruct here. But reality turned out differently than what she had calculated. Kusina had initially planned to quietly fade away, enduring whatever disdain might come her way, just living out the remainder of her life. But Duke Mion had been unexpectedly gentle, despite outwardly referring to Kusina as a guest and himself as the host. Her wish had been granted, so she now saw herself as a guest entitled to the host's care and gentle concern, even forgiving her own mistakes and sickness. Kusina pondered deeply, why is he so kind and gentle? She had come here seeking a place of peace. But if he had feelings for her, her death would become a burden on his heart, adding to his troubles. Everyone had their own private struggles. Within her family, Kusina had thought things were fair. But since the age of 10, she had realized that fairness didn't exist. There was always a hierarchy among family members, and Kusina was always last. To Mion, she was merely a guest. Could he really worry about someone like her, who was nearing death, and care for her in every detail? Brushing away her tears, Kusina accepted her fate. She would die, and he would live on. Therefore, it was best to sever any emotional ties. Whether sympathy or not, it had to ensure he had no feelings at all, because if she died, Mion would blame himself. At this moment, she recalled a book she had read that contained a spell to erase memories. Kusina's skills and vivid imagination didn't just come from her hands. She could recreate anything she saw, felt, or understood. Even if she drew the heart of someone deceased sincerely and vividly, that person would momentarily come back to life. Of course, as time passed, this power would fade, unable to completely resurrect anyone, but it was truly an extraordinary ability. If she had been born into a family with a deep artistic tradition, Kusina would surely have been fully supported, rather than like this. She felt delusional. Now, blaming her family would serve no purpose. Looking outside, the dawn was breaking, and the slightly chilly morning had already filled the room with light. Kusina thought, should I leave this place and go to a monastery or something? Leaving here would mean no one would care for me, but it would be better than haunting his mind. But her medicine was running out, and her strength wouldn't hold out much longer. Or should she just make him hate her? Kusina sat on the bed, her mind racing. She exclaimed aloud in frustration, what should I do in the end? Mion's abrupt and brusque tones startled Kusina. He cut her off before she could speak, asking directly, what type are you? Kusina was taken aback for a moment by the question, then asked Mion, do you already know everything? The Duke pulled out a chair as if setting up a court, sitting directly across from her, pressing on with his inquiry, the physician told me you have an artistic disease, but there are many types. So, what type are you? Instead of a relevant answer, Mion responded with something completely unrelated. Kusina apologized to him for troubling him. Mion corrected her sternly, I don't need you to answer that. Answer my question. Kusina hesitated once again, making Mion feel completely helpless. He exclaimed in frustration, are you finding it difficult to answer? Kusina avoided his gaze, choosing to remain silent. The Duke grew increasingly agitated with her lack of cooperation, pressing, is it too difficult to answer? Kusina, clutching her dress and trembling, replied, I can stay here without bothering you. I promise not to trouble you. But if I cause you concern, I will leave immediately. Mion, feeling desperate, struggled to understand what this girl was thinking or wanting, but each word she spoke was resolute. The Duke asked seriously, if you leave here, can you survive? Silence fell terrifyingly upon the room once again. He decided to ask a simpler question, I'm asking, what type are you? Missing limbs, missing hands, or just outright dead? Truly a great general, straightforward and resolute with every word. Kusina remained silent, her expression admitting the worst possible outcome. Mion swallowed hard, realizing that she truly was that type. There was no medical facility in the north that could treat her, and she couldn't leave due to the flood of monsters. Kusina shook her head helplessly, whatever you do won't change anything. Mion suggested, you only need to rid yourself of that art. Kusina firmly replied without hesitation, no. If I do that, I have nothing left. It's been a lifelong companion. For Kusina, it was her very life. Removing it would be like draining blood from her heart, she'd rather die. Mion fell silent before her lifelong companion. Kasina had expected her to listen, but she was wrong. Drawing was her pleasure and solace. Mian, feeling powerless, changed the subject. So why did you come here like this? You probably need time to clear your mind, don't you? Seeing Kasina choose silence again, Mian teased, you're even silent about that? He had become quite engrossed in this prey. The Duke glared at Kasina, saying, I've endured enough of you. Kasina decided to compromise, but she judged Mian's expression and said, this is a little childish and very long, so it won't be very good. Finally, she decided to compromise, coaxing a difficult child indeed. Mian smiled gently, saying, it's okay, I have plenty of time. Take your time. Kasina felt extremely strange, pondering deeply. She had never confided in anyone before, so where should she start? 10 minutes passed, with Kasina remaining as silent as a mouse, not uttering a word. Just a moment ago, he had growled, but 10 minutes was enough time for him to return to his complacent expression. He gently reminded her, Kasina, should you start talking now? She opened up, speaking truthfully, I was diagnosed 2 months ago. At that time, I was just arranging my thoughts to come here to relax and adjust my thinking. I don't know if it's because of the illness or the aftermath of resentment from the illness, but I feel overwhelmed just because of trivial things. My birthday coincides with my elder brother's outing day, so I always have to cancel it and celebrate my birthday alone. The item I cherish the most must be handed over to my younger sister, whom I don't want to do anything, even though my younger sister is praised for doing little things, while I try so hard to get no attention at all. Kasina chuckled bitterly, acknowledging her somewhat selfish and childish tendencies. After finishing her story, she discreetly observed the Duke's expression. He remained very calm and asked again, so, on your elder brother's outing day, did you cry and throw a tantrum to have your birthday celebrated? Did you hit your younger brother to snatch back that favorite item? Or were you jealous of your younger sister getting attention from the whole family? Kasina was startled and had to clarify, no, none of that. Absolutely not. What are you trying to say? Mian made an accurate observation, so then, what exactly makes all of that childish? I ask sincerely. Being childish is like accidentally spilling water on your father's important documents and fearing his scolding, so you run away, leaving behind a note saying you're going on a trip. But what the young lady did, there's nothing childish about it at all. Kasina pushed back, isn't it natural to compromise for loved ones within a family? That's why I call myself childish for leaving because I thought I couldn't compromise anymore. Mian asked seriously, why do you believe that compromising within the family is natural? My elder brother is indeed a sharp person, always thinking logically and getting to the point quickly, Kasina was about to answer. However, she was stunned by her own thoughts, only now realizing the illumination she was experiencing. She wondered when she started believing that she had to sacrifice everything for her siblings, while in reality, it wasn't necessary. Mian sighed deeply, ultimately, who taught this girl such twisted reasoning to live normally? He called Kasina with a serious expression. Kasina, still tangled in her confused thoughts, hurriedly replied, Sir Mian. The Duke slowly approached Kasina, sitting down beside her, pulling her into an embrace with some difficulty, and gently said, if you want to cry, just cry. It'll be easier this way. The young girl, perplexed, looked at the Duke, tears gently falling. In reality, her straightforward brother was finding this incredibly awkward, because the books he read said to comfort a girl like this, and he was putting it into practice. Kasina hesitated for a moment, then finally leaned into the Duke's embrace and cried, silently without uttering a word of complaint. Despite his rough and gruff demeanor, the Duke was now comforting her like a child in his arms. Mian sighed, sensing she was still holding back emotions that couldn't be put into words, making the situation even more heartbreaking. After about some minutes, the scene of consolation still hadn't ended. Kasina cried to release all the pent-up frustrations she had endured for so long. Previously, whenever she felt like crying, she would paint, and those activities would lift her spirits, but she had never truly cried since she was 10 years old. Kasina, now quiet, nodded slightly in response to Mian's question, indicating she was okay. In this moment, the young girl felt a bit ashamed, but Mian remained calm as usual, facing the emotional turmoil within him. Despite his composed exterior, inside, he struggled to control these unfamiliar emotions. Ksina suddenly noticed that her tears had made Mion's shirt damp and stained. She hurriedly apologized for dirtying his clothes. The Duke sighed, noting how she apologized for everything. He solemnly told Ksina, "The issue right now is that I'm here to help you, not the other way around. So there's no need to apologize, instead, say thank you." Ksina, still a bit bewildered, didn't fully grasp his meaning. Mion repeated, "Say thank you." She obediently responded with a quiet thank you. Indeed, it felt much lighter than apologizing. Ksina's realization hit her deeply. This man was teaching her life lessons her parents never did. Mion's advice about not overusing apologies resonated strongly with her. She understood now that constantly apologizing could diminish her own worth in others' eyes and make her shrink inwardly. Conversely, expressing gratitude was always more positive for both parties' emotions. Until now, Ksina had always defaulted to saying "I'm sorry, it's my fault" to smooth things over, or repeatedly assuring others with it's okay to ease their worries. It seemed that everyone had come to expect this from her, but Mion made her see the downside to this habit. Truly grateful, Ksina thanked Mion sincerely. "Thank you so much. From now on, please call me Ksina, Sir Mion." With this exchange, they opened up more to each other. Even the Duke, typically reserved and cool, found himself blushing, unable to conceal his emotions. Ksina felt a newfound confidence and clarity, grateful for Mion's guidance in navigating interpersonal relationships with more dignity and respect for herself. After everything was settled, the Duke advised her to rest more because she was still very weak. Then he went out, and the steward was waiting to announce that there was a reply letter from Mr. Berto. Mion noticed the steward's somewhat strange expression and asked, "Why do you look at me like that?" The steward sighed and confessed, "You look quite mysterious, Your Grace." Mion couldn't understand, "What's strange about me?" "Quickly, hand me the letter." The steward spoke frankly, "Why do you act like you dislike her when you actually care more about the young lady than anyone else?" Mion couldn't explain, just saying it was because he wanted to show care. Besides, he opened the letter, which was from that damned Berto. He wrote explicitly, "So you intend to invite me to use that artistic talent to save people? Then you should know how to ask someone properly, Your Grace, instead of being rude." Mion tore up the letter in frustration, wishing he could just grab Berto by the collar and shake some sense into him. But for now, he decided to give him time, not wanting to be disappointed. Meanwhile, Mion asked the steward, "Where do the young ladies usually like to go?" "The training grounds?" The steward, feeling helpless, replied to the Duke, "Fortunately, our family had foreseen this, so we promised the engagement from the very beginning. Otherwise, you might have ended up unmarried." The steward assured him, "Please allow me to investigate, Your Grace." Meanwhile, the doctor who had previously examined Ksina and was also Notcher's mentor, was on his way to the Duke's estate to re-examine the young lady. The horse-drawn carriage had passed the checkpoint on the northern side. The coachman sighed with relief and said to the doctor, "Thank goodness, it's early winter now, so the checkpoints are tightly guarded due to rampant mythical beasts. Luckily, we managed to pass through. If things continue like this, we should arrive at the Duke's estate in a few days." The doctor thanked the young coachman for taking him all the way to the Duke's estate. The coachman gave a humble smile and refused the thanks, reminding the doctor that he had once saved his entire family. However, the coachman was curious about why the doctor had embroidered a map onto a handkerchief. The doctor smiled gently and explained, "It's because I have something important to do." On the handkerchief was a detailed and lifelike embroidered map of the Genta territory, showcasing the doctor's meticulous handiwork. Ksina's mood had significantly improved compared to the gloomy demeanor she had while at the Count's estate. Now, she felt a sense of peace and tranquility in her life. Ksina had developed a new hobby, watching the Duke from her balcony as he trained. She would watch him and then sketch, and this had become a routine from early morning until late at night. Mion's vigorous sword training, combined with the ethereal view through the window, created an almost magical atmosphere. It brought a unique sense of positive energy to Ksina, one she couldn't resist. As a result, the Duke became the central subject of all of Ksina's artistic inspiration. Even when her creative spirit waned, simply watching him would rejuvenate her, allowing her to draw tirelessly. Of course, these were still just rough pencil sketches. As she was drawing, Cassina thought to herself, maybe I should write that down too, that list. Deciding to act on it, Cassina put her drawing aside and went to her desk to pick up a notebook. It was the notebook she used to jot down everything she wanted to do before she died. Recently, she hadn't written anything new in it. Despite her inspiration for drawing, she wasn't sure what to write. She felt completely puzzled, not knowing what more she should do. Life at the Duke's residence was peaceful and fulfilling, and she had already distanced herself from her family. She wondered if she should explore something interesting in the north. But Cassina wasn't sure what to do, and debated whether to ask the Duke. Lost in her thoughts, she muttered to herself. Just as she was thinking about him, he suddenly appeared. There was a knock on the door, and Mion's voice startled Cassina. He was leaning against the doorframe, saying, "There's nothing more interesting in the north than the magical beasts." Cassina grumbled, "Duke, you should knock before entering." Mion pouted, "You know, I knocked 5 times already. How many more times should I knock?" He walked into the room, moving to the spot where Cassina had been sitting earlier, and asked curiously, "What are you doing sitting here drawing from early morning until late at night? You didn't even hear me calling." Cassina was caught off guard by Mion's approach and hadn't had time to hide her drawing. He had already picked it up and saw everything, making her blush furiously. Mion looked at the sketch and exclaimed, "You're drawing me." Cassina hurriedly tried to snatch the drawing back but couldn't reach due to her height. Mion took advantage of this to tease her, "Why do you keep drawing this?" Cassina quickly explained, "It's because I saw you under the night sky looking so cool, so I decided to draw. But I got so absorbed in drawing that I lost track of time and ended up staying up late." Hearing her cute explanation, Mion's face turned noticeably red, and he pretended to look around to control his excitement. He cleared his throat, softly thanked Cassina, and then put her drawing down, deciding not to tease her further. The clock was nearing noon when Cassina asked, "Why did you come in here, Duke? Knocking 5 times must mean something urgent." Mion replied, "I'm going out to inspect the area. I'm worried your health might not handle it, but if you're feeling well, you can come with me. Otherwise, you might get bored staying at home." Cassina eagerly agreed with both hands and feet. Soon after, Mion had prepared a carriage for their departure. The Duke donned a black coat, showcasing his authority and handsomeness. He turned to look at Cassina, a beautiful girl who, after getting dressed, didn't look sick at all. She was also shy and gentle, incredibly adorable. Mion's face flushed red, and with a husky voice, he managed to control himself from hugging her, saying, "I've arranged for a shock-absorbing carriage. You can join me on the inspection as long as you stay by my side." Cassina, already thrilled earlier, felt even happier now. She decided to join the Duke in the carriage. Mion, being very considerate, helped Cassina get in first. Holding his hand, she couldn't help but blush. She had rarely held hands with any man before. The carriage started, heading towards the urban area. Due to the unique terrain of the territory, the city lay deep within, surrounded by forests. Between the forest and the main residential area were fortifications to defend against magical beasts. The maids of the Duke's household were very orderly, standing at the gate to see off their master and his fiancée as they boarded the carriage. Now sitting inside the carriage, Mion had time to leisurely observe Cassina. She looked every bit the part of a noble lady, a delicate flower, not like a Cinderella figure at all. Her delicate features, small face, and striking green eyes stood out against her mysterious brown hair. Truly, she was a little beauty. Mion boldly asked, "Did your parents teach you manners?" Cassina, feeling a bit melancholic, gave a bitter smile and replied, "I didn't learn manners from my parents but from a viscountess." The Duke, puzzled, asked, "Why?" The reason wasn't particularly special. Cassina's younger sister, Abelia, was always ill, so their parents were always caring for her and had no time to teach Cassina manners. Mion, being considerate, decided not to press further as it might touch on her sadness, so he changed the subject. Noticing the notebook she was holding, he asked, "What is that?" Cassina had been holding onto the notebook ever since she arrived, as it was her only belonging. She quickly explained to the Duke, this is a notebook where I write down the things I want to do, but there are still many blank pages because I haven't decided what else to write yet, she said. Mian looked at the notebook, feeling a bit puzzled. Does it need to be so grand? Don't overthink and be too selective. Just write down simple things you can actually do, he advised. Ksina, feeling a bit lost, realized he was right. I guess I've been overthinking. What he said is simple but very accurate, she thought. Mian decided to address the issue, even if it might seem a bit blunt. As you mentioned earlier, you received different education compared to your siblings. The fact that your parents didn't teach you because they were focused on another child is naturally saddening and understandable. Every word from the Duke resonated deeply with Ksina. Rarely, or perhaps never, had anyone advised her so sincerely. Just then, the carriage stopped at their destination. Mian stepped out first and said something to Ksina that he had wanted to say for a long time. He turned around, smiled brightly, took her hand, and whispered, "The world is vast. Don't make yourself small. As long as you hold my hand like this, I will show you all the beautiful things in life instead of those painful memories." At the Count's house, you can think of it as if they had grown a tree in a small flower pot. Now, that tree has grown too big, mature enough to break the pot and explore the world. You won't be bound by that small garden anymore, Mian said. All the simple and sincere emotions from Mian moved Ksina deeply, and in her eyes, there was only him, gentle and considerate. Who would have thought that a duke, famous for his irritability, would have such a positive philosophy of life and would use that gentleness to warm her heart? Suddenly, she burst out laughing, which made Mian unexpectedly annoyed. "Why are you laughing all of a sudden?" he asked. Giggling, she replied, "It's just that when you mentioned the tree, I suddenly thought about a tree running with legs, and it's kind of funny." Mian grumbled, "Seriously, I was being all serious for once, and you ruined the mood." It had been a long time since Ksina shared such joy with someone. In the refreshing northern breeze, she sincerely thanked Mian, but her voice was so soft that he couldn't hear her. "What did you say?" he asked. Of course, Ksina wouldn't admit it. But there was no denying that Mian could feel her gratitude from the bottom of her heart. Mian led Ksina into the village, which was in the midst of the winter festival. She was visibly delighted by the lively scene, an old woman enthusiastically shouting, a man laughing heartily, people bustling about the streets, and couples where the men carried logs and the women led children. Ksina watched, her eyes wide with wonder, as if it was her first time witnessing such a scene. And it was true, Ksina had never been able to go out and enjoy herself like this before, always tied down by her younger siblings. Now, she and Mian stood before the bustling excitement of one of the streets adorned for the festival. Curious, Ksina asked Mian, "Is it always this lively during the winter festival?" Mian explained, "Because we have a lot of meat to eat during winter, we can have such festivals." After saying this, the Duke slyly peeked at Ksina's expression. As expected, she couldn't hide her curiosity. Ksina asked, "Where does all this meat come from, and what kind of meat is it?" Even in the south, where it's warm and wealthy, we rarely have such vibrant festivals. The Duke answered her question, "The meat here is from magical beasts. There's plenty of it." Ksina thought she had misheard and asked again, "What? Eating magical beasts? Is that even possible?" Mian pointed behind her, "Look back there. That's a magical beast that intruded here and was caught by the soldiers to be butchered. In the north, winter almost completely isolates us in snow, and magical creatures invade daily. That's why we have so much meat. The villagers, being hungry, clean and eat it." Not just the meat, Mian added, "Besides the meat, the bones and fat of the creatures can be used to make household items like candles or knives. Their fur and other finer parts can be turned into jewelry. In short, every part of a magical beast in the north is utilized to the fullest." Ksina's eyes lit up as she gazed at the enormous magical beast, marveling at the sheer amount of meat. She was curious about its taste, and as Mian continued his explanation, her excitement grew. She reached out to touch the fur of the beast that the villagers had skinned and were drying nearby. "It's incredible. These pelts are so lifelike, like the creature is still alive," she exclaimed. Mian, observing her childlike wonder, asked if she wanted to buy anything. As the wealthiest man in the region, he could afford to indulge her whims. While Kasina was engrossed in watching the villagers butcher a beast, a worker accidentally bumped into her. Kasina, already lacking strength, stumbled. Mian immediately reached out to catch her, wrapping her in his protective embrace. He didn't scold the worker, understanding that they were simply absorbed in their tasks. Kasina's heart began to race from the sudden contact and the shock. She felt Mian's breath as he held her, and her face flushed with warmth. She intended to call his name, but noticed his expression had turned deadly serious. His eyes flashed with a menacing look, and the surrounding area was filled with the ringing of alarm bells. Confused by the situation and unfamiliar with the warning signals, Kasina turned to Mian and asked, "What's happening, my lord?" He briefly explained the situation. Magical beasts have infiltrated nearby, and quickly headed towards the city walls to assess the situation. Upon reaching the guards, he demanded, "What's the status?" The guards reported, 2 magical beasts are concentrated outside the city. Casualties are unclear, but the soldiers are still holding their ground. The roaring cries of the monstrous creatures echoed everywhere. They were starving to the extreme, their ghastly appearance terrifying. But the soldiers Mian had trained were not skilled warriors, yet they struggled to buy time until the Duke arrived. All 3 beasts were ferocious, their eyes demonic, heads adorned with horns, and bodies muscular. Mian hurriedly removed his coat and told Kasina, "Stay here, I'll go out to assess the situation." Before the girl could react, the Duke kicked open the windowsill and leapt down. Kasina panicked, watching Mian jump from a height of at least 2 floors. Mian quickly ordered the guards to take care of the young lady standing above. Kasina herself was horrified, asking the guards if he was okay after jumping from such a height. They were used to such sights and reassured Kasina that the Lord was fine, but she remained deeply concerned, asking if the situation was under control. In reality, it wasn't quite under control as the monsters were among the most challenging. Watching Mian wield his sword, blood splattered everywhere, his blade stained with the creature's blood. Mian now completely shed his gentle demeanor when caring for Kasina, instead displaying seriousness in protecting his comrades and the local residents. These were Hades, the newest species with thick armor, buffalo-like horns, and extreme ferocity. Soloing one was nearly impossible, so the Duke could only fend them off. Every strike of Mian's sword could only scratch the tough hide of the monstrous creatures. Despite Mian's utmost efforts, Kasina gritted her teeth in frustration, feeling helpless just standing there. She pondered if there was anything she could do to aid the Duke. One of the soldiers inadvertently mentioned that since this was a new species, its weaknesses were unknown, making it difficult to defeat and only possible to drive away. This sparked an idea in Kasina's mind. She quickly pulled out her sketchbook and tried to deduce if her knowledge could be of any help. If Mian knew the weakness of this creature, perhaps there would be a chance to win, minimizing the struggle and losses for Mian's side. The Haida seemed to be aware, locking eyes with Mian. Both monsters growled, exchanging strategies to claim this territory. Eventually, the Haida grunted and retreated, relieving everyone as the Duke's arrival forced the Haida pack to withdraw. Without him, this winter wouldn't have been peaceful. While Mian checked on everyone's well-being, Kasina saw that the battle had ended and rushed down. However, her body couldn't keep up, exhausted from running and feeling the chill creeping into her limbs. As she descended, she saw the Duke covered in blood, but he paid no mind to himself, immediately inquiring about the soldiers' injuries and delegating medical aid to those wounded. Mian scolded her, "Why didn't you wait for me up there? I would have come up after finishing the fight." But Kasina, stubborn as ever, hurried to where the Duke was, struggling to catch her breath. Despite her condition, she didn't care, taking out a handkerchief to wipe the blood off Mian's face. Her gentle and caring gesture stunned all the soldiers around. It was the first time a girl had come so close to the Duke. Mian grabbed her hand that was wiping his face and noticed how icy cold it was. He immediately complained, "Why are your hands so cold? Didn't anyone give you a blanket or something?" His remark made the nearby guards sweat nervously for not taking care of the girl as the Duke had instructed. Kasina tried to reassure the Duke that it wasn't necessary to be so concerned. He persisted, then suddenly pulled out a gift from his pocket, a necklace with a sparkling, peculiar yellow stone pendant. He placed it around Cassina's neck amidst her astonishment. Clearly, the Duke was a man of action rather than words. Cassina stared in awe at the necklace, sensing something special about it. The soldiers, utterly surprised, cheered loudly. Mian cleared his throat to quiet them down, threatening, anyone who doesn't quiet down will run 100 laps around the training grounds. However, even this punishment wasn't enough to deter the group, as they continued chatting and milling about, much to Mian's growing frustration. Cassina redirected the Duke's attention to something else, asking, "What kind of stone is this?" Mian explained, "This isn't just a stone, it's a kind of artifact obtained from defeating the monster." As he spoke, the stone began glowing in Cassina's hand. She felt it was warmer than a hearth, replenishing her current body warmth. But hearing that it's taken from a monster, isn't that a bit creepy? Cassina widened her eyes, looking to the Duke for further explanation. Mian, frustrated by the situation, retorted, "I'm just stating facts. In summary, these items are rarely obtained when killing a monster." Mian knew Cassina occasionally had low body temperature, which caused her to have fevers, so he found a gem for her. Moreover, there is a belief here that keeping the gem of the monster makes one healthier, he said. Mian put his hand on Cassina's head, gently comforting her, "I want you to get better, my lady." Brimming with gentleness, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor, she carefully tucked these moments into her memory, ensuring they would serve as cherished mementos to dispel any loneliness or sorrow. Mian suggested, "Let's head back now. We can come back here tomorrow for the festival." Cassina chuckled mischievously at him. "All right, let's go back with him then." As they were preparing to leave, a horse-drawn carriage stopped nearby. A long unseen familiar face appeared. Mian asked Cassina, "What's going on? Do you know that person?" It turned out to be the physician who had treated her in the south and was the only one familiar with Cassina's medical condition. He greeted Cassina warmly with a smile, which thrilled her immensely, not expecting the physician to be here. She eagerly asked why he was here. He chuckled and replied, "There are ways, if my patient wishes it, I can make it happen." Cassina introduced the physician briefly, "This is Viscount Mian," and also introduced Mian, "This is the physician who has been treating me." He swept his gaze from top to bottom. The Duke turned out to be quite familiar indeed. He was none other than the fiancé of the young lady. Thus, she was not just any Cassina but the daughter of the Count, Lady Cassina. Mian interrupted their joyful reunion. He suggested, "It's getting late. Why don't we head back to the estate and discuss further?" In the warm south, today the Duke's mansion has an esteemed guest. This individual was on par with Duke Mian and was the most esteemed person after the royal family. As soon as the carriage stopped, the servant was prepared to serve the unmanageable hand. That person was none other than Duke Berto, a friend of Duke Mian. The Duke was happy to meet Berto but didn't understand why he had come to this place. Berto chuckled in a playful manner, "The reason I came here is because one day, a few days ago, eating a good piece of tenderloin, suddenly, I don't know where, a cool breeze appeared, threw the brains out, and flew my flesh." Berto's hair was suddenly out of control, and the fearful ask was, "There?" Berto quickly reassured, "Nothing, I know it, I'm used to it. It's a messenger bird. I can't stand the violent tendencies from their owners to their pets anymore." The steward took out a letter from the bird's leg and handed it to Duke Berto. The content of the letter was that Mian is currently keeping one of the Duke's children in the mansion. This person has an art disease, but they don't know what kind, so they asked Berto to come over and also informed the Duke's family. Berto muttered to himself, knowing full well about this disease, which he himself was currently suffering from. Most artists he knew also had it, but managed to control it completely. So how serious is it that your friend had to send an urgent message? Therefore, Berto is here now to assess the situation. He asked if the Duke had prepared everything he needed. In the guest reception room, the Duke had all of Cassina's paintings brought out. He had a perplexed look on his face, wondering why he suddenly came to the house and demanded to see these paintings. He looked at his daughter's artwork, then furrowed his brow and slammed it on the table, criticizing her painting as somewhat ugly. "Someone like you should just look at them for fun," he said. Berto sipped his tea, his face grimacing, thinking to himself how unpleasant it was for someone to criticize his daughter's work in front of others like this. Berto sarcastically remarked, perhaps the Duke here should refine his eye for art. Seeing the uncomfortable guest, Casina's father asked, what do you mean by that? Why come to my house and say such things all of a sudden? Seeing the Duke angrily criticizing his daughter's painting, Berto felt a bit mocking and a lot colder inside. Who would be so rude about their daughter's cherished artwork? In reality, he sponsored many artists with artistic diseases, most of whom had some minor conflicts with their families, but they only hid someone in the house, not everyone. As for Casina, this girl and her Duke family have such deep-seated conflicts that they have to run away like that? Berto coldly asked him, do you know if your daughter Casina has an artistic disease? His expression clearly showed mocking amusement. An outsider knows, and you in this household don't? That's the joke of the year. His answer, of course, was a flat denial, I don't know. He asserted about his daughter, saying, she doesn't have that talent. How could she possibly have an artistic disease? Berto scoffed, you seem to look down on your daughter a bit there. The Duke, furious, gritted his teeth, unbelievable. If she were ill, she'd be at home, not running away. As time passed during this conversation, Berto perhaps began to understand why the lady sought refuge at Mion's place. Berto chuckled sarcastically, the young lady running away? Duke, you're saying someone visiting their fiancé is running away? That's a new terminology. The Duke was shocked to the core. He never expected Casina to actually be there. He exclaimed, why did she come there? Berto immediately twisted his words, so are you suggesting I lied, or is my friend Duke Mion Thodo liar? The Duke stood up angrily and scolded Berto, stop that right now. What's with suddenly coming to see the paintings and then saying such things? You can leave now. Berto didn't bother to stay any longer. He stood up and brushed off his coat, casually taking Casina's painting with him. Everything here is done now, no reason to linger. The Duke also understood the implications. Regardless, Duke Berto's status was higher than his, so he thanked him for the information about his daughter. I'll have the opportunity to come and fetch her later. He made Berto feel quite amused. Berto walked towards the door, but before leaving, he looked disdainfully at the Duke, provoking his anger. As he opened the door, Berto spoke, when I told you Casina your daughter was ill, you didn't believe it, saying she couldn't be. But when I said she was in the north with her fiancé, you immediately believed it. Ber gave him a mocking look, seems like Duke Berto only chooses to believe what he wants to, huh? And did you know? If Casina were my daughter and I heard she was sick, I would probably ask if she was okay before asking where she was. Each word cut deep into the Duke's heart. Outsiders always seem more perceptive, and he felt he was losing to someone he had never met like Berto. Berto stepped out of the door. He truly felt sorry for Casina's talent, born into a family like this. Looking back at the painting, everything Casina depicted had vanished. If that was the case, it wasn't just an ordinary miracle anymore. In the end, Casina became entangled in that deadly disease. Casina's skill is akin to that of the creator, a power equivalent to that of a god. Casina is like the life force of the world, capable of rooting deeply within to create everything, but requiring ample resources and sturdy support. Yet Casina is just a human body, wielding a power comparable to creation. Berto pondered over those drawings for quite some time, seemingly unsure. Hopefully, I will arrive in time. The Duke returned to his office, sighing deeply and wearily organizing all the information. What he remembered was that Casina's daughter had gone to the fiancé's house. Right then, there was a knock at the door. He quickly regained his composure and allowed the visitor in, his eldest son, Infix, accompanied by Abelia's personal physician from Abelia. Infix mentioned that the doctor had something to report, prompting them to enter immediately. The Duke, suddenly anxious, asked the physician about Abelia's condition. Without comparison, without pain. Notcher smiled and reported that the young lady's health had improved, stabilized, with no worrisome developments. Her body was capable enough to attend small tea parties. The Duke expressed his profound gratitude that Abelia was finally healthy. He hoped she would remain so. Indeed, this excessive discrimination chilled any heart. He inquired further about his wife's condition, observing that she didn't seem well. Notcher had also checked on the lady and reported that due to prolonged anxiety and insomnia, she hadn't been well, but now she was okay. The Duke breathed a sigh of relief. He hoped Notcher could stay by Abelia's side so that she wouldn't feel lonely, while continuing to monitor and care for his wife. After completing his report, Notcher asked for permission to leave. As he walked away, a painful thought lingered in his mind. Should he inform the Duke about Cassina's condition and her terminal illness? However, Notcher's top priority remained Abelia, fearing that revealing Cassina's imminent death would shock her, despite knowing that she's close to her end. Ultimately, Notcher decided against telling and opted to wait until his mentor returned in the spring, knowing the outcome would be known by then. Just as Notcher left, Infix, the Duke's eldest son, arrived with Abelia's personal physician from Abelia's estate. Seeing his father's troubled expression, Infix asked what was wrong. The Duke inquired if Infix had noticed the grand carriage of Duke Berto leaving, assuming he had just returned and would have seen it. Infix confirmed seeing a luxurious carriage bearing the Duke's crest. Perplexed, the Duke explained that Duke Berto had come to announce that Cassina had been found and was currently at the Duke's northern estate. This shocking revelation left Infix stunned. Despite being the most concerned for Cassina in the household, he couldn't express it openly. Infix was shocked to hear this earth-shattering news. In fact, he might be the most concerned person in the household about Cassina, but he couldn't show it openly. His elder brother suggested immediately going to fetch her, but their father refused. He took a headache remedy, explaining that the northern routes were already closed, making travel impossible. Concerned, Infix asked his father what they should do now. After taking his medicine, his father's mind cleared, and he solemnly asked Infix a question that weighed heavily on his mind. How did Duke Mion appear during the engagement party when he wasn't at home? Infix, at least fair-minded, replied that Duke Mion seemed perfectly flawless. Throughout the party, Infix observed Mion's attentive and caring demeanor towards his sister, leading him to speculate that she might have feelings for him as well. Their father sighed heavily, shaking his head. Well, I never expected a daughter of mine to pursue her fiancé before their wedding. It's beyond comprehension. She's not even half the person Abelia is. And on top of that, she didn't bother to send a single letter home to ease her parents' worries like this. Infix defended his sister, saying, she's quiet, so maybe we just don't understand her well enough, father. But when she returns, what do you intend to say to her? His father sighed deeply and asserted firmly, I'll say what needs to be said, confront her about abandoning her parents like that. Yet, deep down, he still wrestled with one question, what did we do wrong for Cassina to feel she had to run away? When it came to discussing her escape, it revealed a father's profoundly negative view, driven to the extreme by his frustration with his own flesh and blood. His perspective contrasted sharply with that of the elderly physician and Mion, both deeply concerned about Cassina. Cassina was quite delighted to reunite with the physician in this icy land. She asked him, how did you manage to come all the way here? The physician replied, I found my way here through the power of miracles. Cassina found it hard to believe that even the physician had an artistic ailment. Did that mean he had artistic problems too? He displayed an intricately embroidered handkerchief, brightly colored, saying, my embroidery skills are quite good, after all. Both Cassina and Mion still didn't understand how that embroidered handkerchief could help the physician determine Cassina's location. The physician chuckled lightly and prepared for a demonstration. He began searching through his bag, took out a lighter, and slowly explained that it was a marvel he had created. When he wanted to know the location of anything, he simply had to burn the item he had embroidered on the handkerchief. When the embroidered object on the handkerchief burned completely, the magic would immediately reveal itself, and he would know exactly where the object was, no matter its conditions. Of course, he had to perform this feat with his embroidery skills. The physician proudly boasted that he had previously assisted royalty and detectives in solving crimes using this talent.